Hello, my name is Blake Little. I'm with the Missouri Basketball Coaches Association, and it is my pleasure today to introduce Coach Gene Zanetti of Basketball Mindset, here to talk about their program and all the things they do to help our athletes have a mental edge. I'll turn it over to you, Gene.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Blake. I appreciate it. So everyone, great to be with you. I guess first thing we have to do is we have to address the elephant in the room, the whole COVID virus and everything we're going through now with the pandemic. Obviously, things are tough all across the country. I work with teams literally coast to coast and beyond, and they're all struggling with a lot of the same things that you are, the teams and the athletes. We see it constantly. So there's a lot of uncertainty. You're going through it. We're going through it. Maybe there's going to be a season. Maybe there's not going to be a season. Maybe it's a shortened season. Either way, we want our athletes prepared. And how much more important is that mindset if there's not a season? I mean, I can't even imagine being back in my competing days, whether it was high school or college, and all of a sudden finding out there's no season or a truncated season. So we want to make sure we get that mind right. Taking it from the top, I always start with the same first question, no matter who I'm working with, whatever team, whatever size, whether it's youth, right through our Olympic team or professional athletes we work with. And I always ask this: what percentage of basketball is physical and what percentage is mental? If you had to put a number on it. And I know you can't, there's no exact number that you could put on it, but if you had to say, what percentage of basketball is physical versus mental? Most people will say that basketball, just like a diet, just like a career, coaching, everything, it's probably 90% mental. Or I'll hear sometimes 50 to 90% mental, somewhere in that range. Again, we don't know exactly what it is, but the point is this: we all know it's a very large piece of the pie, that mindset. So the next question is, what percentage of your time do you spend training your team on mindset versus physical and technical? And usually, if you're like most people, that's a very different story. Whereas everyone says basketball is 50 to 90% mental, they say, generally speaking, they're training 90 to 95% skills and physically. I think back to a great YouTube video I watched of Michael Jordan, and he said that what really separates the good players from the great is the mind. And he said that was something that he's the most proud of, his mindset. It's a great YouTube video, good thing you could pull up. But you don't need to see Michael Jordan to say that, to understand that. I'm sure a lot of you coaches or former athletes and just coaching for a while, you know how important that mind is. So here's the key: if we're saying basketball is 90% mental, we better make sure that we're spending 90% of our training time on the mindset. Now, does that mean I'm putting down the physical or the technical? Absolutely not. You have to master the fundamentals, the technique, the skills, the drills, the conditioning, the strength training. It's all important. But we need to make sure we're also working on that mindset. And going back again now, especially during the pandemic, during this whole COVID thing, how much more difficult is it? How much more important is that mindset? With such a degree of uncertainty, the mindset has never been more important than it is right now in 2020. We don't know what the future holds, but we need to be ready. So again, if we're saying it's 90% mental, we need to pick up the pace with our mindset training. And because a lot of athletes, they work very hard, but they're not necessarily working very smart. Or even if they are working very smart, they could always work smarter, bridging that gap between the physical and the mental. That's exactly what we do. And because of that, we tend to see a lot of athletes struggling with the same things. So, list of our common mindset red flags. You might have seen us write this before. Difficulty relaxing under the shot clock, letting opponents get under your skin, blaming the referees and teammates for mistakes, can't stay focused in the zone, too cautious and hesitant, feeling pressure during foul shots, and being a lot better in practice than in a game. Those aren't physical issues. Those are mental issues. And the key to fix that is you have to work directly on the mindset. So you can't just sit back and think about it. You have to put work in. So it's not just the physical training. I'm all about it again. But you can't expect physical training to solve mental problems. As an example, in school, you can't use history to improve your science. In other words, you don't get better at science by studying history. You don't get better at English by studying math. maybe there is a little correlation, but overall, you get what I'm saying. You have to attack the problem head on. And that's what we want to do with mindset. We want to attack the problem head on. We can even back up a step with that and say that when you look at what is mindset all about, what are we about with basketball mindset? What's our purpose? Our job is really to use basketball as a vehicle to build virtue and mental skills for these athletes' entire lives. And again, I know I'm preaching to the choir. You're good coaches, you get it. But it's worth repeating. It's worth going back to on a regular basis, even myself as a mindset coach. You always want to get back to your why. Our most important lesson in goal setting is more important than your goal. You need to know your why. Our why is to use basketball as a vehicle to build virtue and mental skills for their entire life. Confidence is confidence. Mental toughness is mental toughness. Knowing what to focus on is the same. Whether we're in a championship game, taking the SATs or ACTs, job interview, saying no to drugs or peer pressure, do you believe in yourself or not? Right? Do you know what to focus on? Do you know how to relax under pressure? When all of a sudden you start feeling those sweaty palms, your stomach is turning, you're getting all these racing thoughts, everyone goes through it. Do you know what to do to calm yourself down and bring out your best? So that's what we want to do. We want to bridge that gap between the physical and the mental training. So these athletes can use these lessons. These student athletes can use these lessons for their whole life, and how much more important now, as we say. So just to debunk a lot of maybe the confusion or misunderstandings, a lot of people use the word mindset. A lot of people use the word motivation. We really don't know what that even means. It's kind of like when we say the word happiness. What is happiness? Well, if you want to be happy for a day, eat a steak. You want to be happy for a week, buy a car. You want to be happy for a year, win the lottery. So it almost becomes like a weird term, and not as useful term. So what is mindset training? I'll start off with what it's not. What we do is not motivational speaking, counseling, or therapy. I love those things. So my degrees, I have 2 master's degrees, one in exercise science, sports psychology, and the other one in clinical psychology. And I was a school psychologist. This is not therapy we're doing here. It's a little bit different than that. I love therapy, but that's not what this is. Same thing with motivational speaking. If you're anything like me, you probably follow a lot of great motivational speakers on Instagram, on Facebook, on YouTube. Again, that's not what this is. I want you to start thinking of mindset training as strength training for the mind. Strength training for your mind. Okay, so there's a couple parallels there that need to be made. You think about strength training. How many months out of the year are serious basketball players lifting weights? Probably all 12. You look at it the same thing with your skills and drills, technique. How many months out of the year are basketball players practicing their skills and drills? Probably 12 months out of the year. So if we're saying 50 to 90% of basketball is mindset, how many months out of the year do you think you should be practicing your mindset? Probably all 12. That's one way it's similar to strength training. Another way, just like there's different physical muscles in the body, you might have one athlete who has very strong legs but weak arms. Another athlete might have a strong neck but a weak grip. There's different physical muscles in the body, and we know we're only as strong as our weakest link. It's the same thing with our mind. There's different mental muscles. One of the biggest misconceptions people have with mindset training is you have it or you don't. I could tell you this, I've been doing this for 12 years. We've worked with tens and thousands of athletes across the country. Not only me, but at this point in time, we have 60 mindset coaches. Before COVID broke out, we were working with over 250 teams. We speak at coaching conventions all the time. I could tell you this, all athletes, the best ones, the UFC fighters we're working with, there's some mental muscles they're strong at. There's some mental muscles they're weak at. That goes for all athletes, even if it's only relatively mentally weak. We're only as strong as our weakest link. Now, it's not just about fixing your weakest link with mindset training. That's another big mistake people make when they think about mental training. They think, if I work on my mindset, that means I have a problem. Mindset training, just like strength training, is also going to take you to the next level. It gives you an edge. It maximizes your potential. So there are a lot of athletes and teams that we work with that struggle with very specific mental hurdles, mental struggles, these mindset red flags that I told you about before. But remember this, for every one of those teams that we work with that are struggling, we work with a lot of teams also, they have it all together. they're one of the top. They're already state champions or national champions or a professional athlete. But what they're looking to do, they know sports is a game of inches, right? You think of Al Pacino in his speech, Any Given Sunday. Life's a game of inches. So is football. So is basketball in your case. And every inch counts. You want to make sure that at the end of your career, you've done everything you possibly could to reach your goals. So you want to make sure you're tackling that mindset. So there's different mental muscles. I was just telling Blake before we jumped on this that we break mindset training into two different phases. Phase one is off season, and that's more focusing on the base of the pyramid. So building a solid mindset foundation, goal setting, mental toughness, motivation. You have to have that base of the pyramid. Mathematically, a pyramid is only as high as its base is wide. So we need to be built on a very strong foundation. Next, there's peak performance, which is in season, and that's more geared towards confidence, aggressiveness, relaxing under pressure, staying in the present moment. So we're not dwelling on the past. We're thinking too much about the future. We want to be in that present moment. And right now, again, with this whole COVID and the pandemic, we don't know what's going to happen. So these athletes need to be able to have that phase one down, that foundation level mindset. They also need that peak performance mindset because they might be called on to perform at any time. And they got to be ready to go because their opponents are ready to go, or maybe they're not, but we got to be ready to go. We're not focused on our opponents. We're focusing on what we could do to be successful. Finally, a big way that mindset training is similar to strength training is you can't just think about mindset training. I'll say that again, very important. You cannot just think about mindset training. You have to actually do the mindset training. Just like weightlifting, you can't think about lifting weights. Doesn't do anything. You got to get in the weight room. You got to squat. You got to deadlift. You got to bench press. You have to do those core lifts. You can't just think about them. Same thing with your technique, your skills and drills. You can't just think about technique, skills, and drills. You know your athletes need to get out there and practice them. It's the same thing with the mindset. As a school psychologist, I needed to learn how do students absorb information? How do people learn information? How do we retain? And if you're just listening to a lecture like you are right now, do you know what the percentage is that you're likely to remember? What do you think? Just listening to this lecture, if you don't take any notes, you're just sitting back listening, what percentage do you think you're going to retain on average? 5%. 5%, that's down there in the toilet. It's almost like we're not even here. So what does that mean? Does that mean just sign off? No, it means we have to do things to make us more likely to remember. We need to have more active participation. So asking questions at the end is great. That's going to bump up your retention because that becomes group discussion. Writing it down, putting it down on paper, that's going to help. Once you learn the lesson, teaching it to other people. That helps retention. So we talk about that all the time, how to be an active learner. And like I said, these lessons you're going to apply to the basketball court. They're going to apply this to school and for the rest of their life. So they have to learn how to be active learners. You can't just sit back and listen to mindset training. You have to do the exercises. So a lot of the teams, I'm sure a lot of your teams will be working with you after this. And one of the things your team is going to be required to do is go through our mindset lessons. Our mindset coach would take the team 45 minutes like we're doing now, except they'll have worksheets in front of them. And they're filling out those exercises to build those different mental muscles, going through very concrete situations. What are they telling themselves after they make a mistake? After the ref makes a bad call? After they do something well? A lot of times we're in our head after something goes well for us. Our opponent does something cheap, takes a cheap shot, does something dirty. They need to know. A lot of athletes know what they're going to do physically and technically in different situations. What do I do if the ball gets passed to me? But a lot of them don't know. They don't have a plan what they're going to tell themselves when adversity hits. Now think about how that applies to COVID. Think about how that applies to school now with all the remote learning. They have to know mentally how they're going to respond to these situations and have a plan. That gives them the best chance they can to succeed. Back to what I was saying before, the key is they can't just sit back. It's not passive mindset training. Just like strength training, you have to do the mindset exercises. That's the key. You have to do the things that we're telling you to do in our mindset exercises. Otherwise, almost nothing happens. This is not some kind of magic pill, potion, magic formula. That's not how it works. You got to do the mindset training, just like you do the strength training, the conditioning, and the skills and drills. It's not going to work if you don't make it work. But how important is it? I've heard coaches in the past say, we might have some players that are a little resistant to this. They might not like it. And my response to that is, how many of your players really like to do suicides? How many of your players really like to run those sprints, to get up in the morning, do those early workouts, to go one more time with our drills, and to go over and over to get those extra reps? A lot of them don't like to do it. And of course, it's important to get to that point where you love to prepare, but sometimes you have to push yourself, because we know how important mindset is. So we need to push them sometimes and say, hey, we know this is important. This is going to bring your game to the next level. That's why it's important. Our mental training, we cannot leave it to chance. It's too important to leave to chance. So that's how we're very similar to strength training, not motivational speaking, not counseling or therapy. And I spoke a lot about this. We spoke at the Oklahoma, Idaho, and New York basketball coaches convention. We had a lot of fun going on with this, and we were speaking about a lot of these things. One of the great coaches, obviously, probably the greatest coach of all time, John Wooden, we're going to hit on this in a little bit, but never spoke to his team about winning. He spoke about getting the most out of their potential. He spoke about their performance. So as an example of a key lesson that we have, and I'm sure probably a lot of you, if you're following us on social media, if you get our emails for any length of time, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say the predator mindset. So every great coach, it's a basic lesson. You've probably said this many times to your athletes. Coaches, parents, teachers, employers, they say this: focus on what you could control. Don't focus on what you can't control, right? Probably every coach told you that you know. Every coach, every teacher that you had probably said that. Focus on what you can control. Forget about what you can't control. But how do you get that message to stick? Especially with young student athletes. How do you get that message to stick? We came up with a great analogy. So in college, I competed in college at the University of Pennsylvania, and I took an animal behavior class at the time. And what did I learn? But there's two different types of animals in the animal kingdom: predator and prey. And the way you could tell the difference just by looking at them, predator and prey, is not their teeth, not their size, it's their eyes. So we say this: if you look at predator animals, lions and tigers and bears, oh my, right? Where are their eyes located? On the front of their head. And why are their eyes on the front of their head? Because they're focused on their goal. They're focused on what they're looking to achieve. So we always say this: eyes on the front like to hunt. Eyes on the front like to hunt. And the great thing is now you're painting a mental image for your athletes, and they have some kind of memorable rhyme they could say with it. Eyes on the front like to hunt. Now think about prey animals: squirrels, chipmunks, rabbits, deer. Sure, probably a lot of you hunt. Well, what do you notice about the deer? Where are their eyes? On the front of their head or on the side? Well, their eyes are more to the side. And why? Because they're prey. They don't want to get eaten for lunch. So their focus is on what's going on around them. They want to see what's going on around them so they don't get eaten for lunch. So just like we say eyes on the front like to hunt, we say eyes on the side like to hide. Eyes on the front like to hunt, eyes on the side like to hide. And that becomes your metaphor for basketball, for school, for your relationships, and for your whole life. You want to have the predator mindset. Now, of course, and I always have to clarify this because anytime you bring up the word predator, bells go off and, oh, what are we talking about here? Of course, it's a metaphor. It's an analogy. We're not talking about childhood predators, any garbage like that. We're not talking about abuse. We're talking about using a metaphor from the animal kingdom. And when you look at that, it really helps because you want your athletes to have a predator mindset. That doesn't mean they're mad when they compete. That doesn't mean they're angry. What it means is you focus on factors within your control. Before a competition, the two factors in your control: your preparation and your lifestyle. Your preparation and your lifestyle. It's not so much your team against the other team. It's your team's lifestyle against the opposing team's lifestyle. If your team's operating at a higher level lifestyle, other teams aren't going to be able to keep up. Maybe not this season, but down the road, that's what's going to happen. So it's preparation and lifestyle. During the day of a competition, there's only 3 things they could focus on, because now their preparation's in the book. Now their lifestyle is basically in the book. Of course, there's little things here and there, getting a good night's sleep. We have a whole series on sleep. That's one of the most important factors. Of course, making good decisions with the food they're consuming during the day. But their predator mindset on game day is effort, attitude, and aggressiveness. Same in life. Effort, attitude, and aggressiveness. That's the predator mindset. The prey mindset is focusing on everything else, right? Eyes on the side like to hide. So if your team's focusing on records, rankings, seedings, predictions, even winning and losing the game, right? How many times your team might have a lead, they start looking over at the clock, they start looking over at the score, and what happens? We start blowing it. Some of our biggest losses our worst performances are shutting down a little too early, because we're up there, we're looking at that clock, aren't we? A lot of times we're looking at the clock, we're looking at the score. Now, of course, you have to be aware of the clock, but you don't want to dwell on it. You can be aware of the score, but you don't want to dwell on the score. There's a big difference there, and a lot of times athletes don't do a good job of that. I'm sure you've seen that. Focusing on comparing ourselves to other people, we do that. We all do that as humans. That's one of the biggest things we're susceptible to doing. We compare ourselves to other people. We compare ourselves to our teammates. We compare ourselves to the other coach. That is all prey mindset. It's not directly within your control. Effort, attitude, and aggressiveness. That's what you want to focus on. Again, John Wooden knew that. That's why he never spoke to his team about winning. He didn't. And ESPN in 2000 named him the #1 coach of any sport. He always spoke about performance, doing the best with that which they were capable of. You know his pyramid of leadership very well. Another one, great example. You look at LeBron. One of the things he spoke about is going on a social media blackout during the playoffs. So it's important to listen to the interviews of a lot of these players, because you get a peek into their mindset. And regardless of how we all may feel about LeBron, you have to look at these athletes, their mindsets in different situations. And one of the things he does is during playoffs, goes off of social media. So he gets away from the prey mindset. I could tell you this. We worked with the U.S. men's and women's Olympic team before 2016. We had 2 heavy favorites to win. And you could see on their Instagram, on their Facebook, during the Olympics, they're taking pictures with Serena Williams, the ones promoting their shoe deal. Neither of them placed. And then the next year, they both go on to win the world championships. Why? The next year, they didn't get involved in all the hype. They weren't going through all the interviews. Instead, they didn't focus on who they were competing against, looking at those brackets, right? We look at those seedings. Okay, if I win, I go here. Thinking about all that. Who might I compete against in the quarters? Who might I compete against in the semis? And the next year, those athletes, they weren't even looking at the brackets. They were just staying in the moment. Effort, attitude, and aggressiveness. It happens in sports. It happens in school. It happens in our whole life. If you're focusing too much on getting a good grade on a test, you're distracted from taking the test. One of the athletes we work with really wants to go to Harvard. Brown University. I knew it was an Ivy League school. One of our rivals, right? I was UPenn. But Brown University, he does really well in the PSATs. Takes the real SATs, and he chokes. Okay? What's going on? This is an athlete I've worked with this team probably since 2012 in one way, shape, or form. And they're one of the top 3 team in the country wrestling high school. And he wants to get into Brown, does well in the SATs, chokes on the real SATs. And I said, well, what are you thinking about while you're taking the SATs? And sure enough, it's predictable. That prey mindset, letting down his parents. He's thinking about getting into Brown. He's thinking about what his score is going to be on that test. Same thing we do in sports. We focus on the outcome. We don't want to look bad in front of our team, our coaches, our friends, the people who came to watch us in the stands. We have all that extra garbage going on in our head. Now, so we always say to our athletes, everything's important, treat everything important, but nothing is special. Once you make a competition special, 9 out of 10 times you do worse. Now there are 1 out of 10 people, probably even more than that. It's probably even less than that. Probably more like, maybe 3 or 4 out of 100 that they could make the competition into a big deal and they do really well. That's the minority. That's very few people. It's the same thing with scouting. For a lot of athletes, like, yes, I get it. It's important to know what your opponents do, but you don't want to be preoccupied with that. And for each individual athlete that has succeeded with scouting, I've seen it actually probably hurt 20. I'm not condemning scouting, obviously. You got to do that as a coach. You got to know what, what they're doing, what the opposition's doing, but you don't want the team to be preoccupied with it. You want to keep stressing effort, attitude, and aggressiveness. Same thing during the pandemic. Maybe there's a season, maybe there's not a season. How's your effort? How's your attitude? How's your aggressiveness? I'm going to break those three areas down right now. Effort, make it very simple. Did you go all out or did you hold back? Simple question, black and white. Were you all in or were you not all in? That would be while you're competing, in practice, in school. Only you know the answer to that. Anyone could put on a face and pretend that they're trying. Make eye contact with the coach. Look how hard I'm working, coach. But are you really going all out? Are you emptying the tank when you're out there? That's your choice. 2, attitude. Are you going to stay positive or negative? Another misconception of mindset training. People think that mindset training and sports psychology is a lot of kumbaya. Let's hold hands in a circle and rainbows and sunshine and butterflies and we're all singing kumbaya. No. Positive thinking is a very hard thing to do. Positive thinking is you just lost a game. You didn't do well on a test. Your parents are coming down on you. Your coaches are coming down on you. Maybe the season got canceled. And just when you think things couldn't get any worse, you found out your girlfriend left you for the drummer. You're having a bad day. It's in those moments that you're still able to stay positive and say, what's the opportunity here? You're on lockdown during COVID. What's the opportunity right now? How can I jump my competition right now? No season? Maybe there is a season. Maybe there's not. I'm still going to get better right now. There's opportunities. As an example, one of the things we did as a company, our basketball mindset program, and we work with all other sports. The parent company is Winning Mindset. We started a daily text message, something you could do. I'm sure a lot of you coaches are on this already, but I could write this over in the comments that every day we added a free daily text message just to give people a little shot in the arm, get motivated. We could all use that. Everyone needs a little kick in the pants from time to time. In fact, when you look at motivation, don't look at it as a one-time thing. That's not the same thing as strength training. You can't just do it once and expect it to last forever, right? Motivation and mindset has got to be a lot more like brushing your teeth, washing your face, taking a shower. You do it all the time, every day, twice a day sometimes. Right? Think about how frequently we're washing our hands now. Same thing with mindset. Mindset needs to be a part of who we are and how we live. So making sure we're putting in that time with the mindset. Like we said, it's not just for people who are struggling. It's people who want to get that edge. So what are we focused on? It's not just, hey, let's stay positive. It's digging down deep. So that, like I said, that was one of the opportunities that we had. We came up with the daily text message. So if you text mindset 1 to the number 84576, you'll get our daily motivation blast. Doesn't cost anything, just an opportunity that we had during this whole COVID thing. We saw that as an opportunity. We put it out there. So text mindset 1 to 84576. You get our daily motivation blast. Also, your athletes, they could always improve. There's always an area to improve. In our goal setting series, now we know how important it is to write down our goals. Unfortunately, most coaches just leave it at that. Now, it's true. If you write down your goal, you're 90% more likely to achieve it than if you did not write it down. Doesn't mean you're 90% chance of getting it, 90% more likely than if you never wrote that goal down. But more important than writing it down, there's a step further than that, writing out your action plan. What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? And most student athletes, they're lost. Even high-level college athletes, they don't know exactly what they're going to do, especially during this COVID time. We break it down for you. Mindset. What's your plan of action look like? We have a daily mindset plan. What are you doing for nutrition? Strength training. Plyometrics. Basketball, you need explosive power. You need to be able to explode. You got to be able to sprint. You need to be able to jump. You need to be real athletic. So you got to be working on those plyometrics. Tendon strength. That's real important. Louis Simmons over at Westside Barbell, they're the strongest powerlifters in the world. He said you need to train your tendons 3 times as much as your muscles. Sounds crazy? Well, that's why they have the strongest not bodybuilders, powerlifters, and they see very few injuries now because they spend a lot more time training their tendons, which is more high rep exercises with bands. Are you working on your tendons? How are they working on their technique, their skills, and their drills? When you write out an action plan, it's got to be numerical. How many minutes? How many days a week? Remember, exercise is broken down into three things: intensity, frequency, and duration. Intensity, how hard are you going? You know, there is a time to speed it up. There is sometimes a time to slow it down. So you're learning the technique better. Intensity, frequency, how often are you doing this? 4 days a week, 5 days a week? And duration, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes? That's got to all be written down. So when we have our athletes do their action plan, they're putting that down on paper. And you have to cover all of those areas: the tendon strength, the plyometrics, the nutrition, the mindset. So that's a whole bunch of dimensions we just added right there. That's a lot of, if your athletes are taking a holistic approach to the sport, rest and recovery, I didn't even include that, but rest and recovery has to be built into your plan. Are they doing that? So seeing the opportunity during COVID, and now sometimes these kids just need someone to talk to. They just need to stay positive because they're getting burnt out. You probably know as well as I do. Zoom burnout is a real thing. People are experiencing that. So they need to be given strategies to keep things interesting, to make it more fun, to take things to the next level. So they have to have a plan. That mindset's got to be attacked. Like I said, it starts with having the difference between knowing the difference between that predator mindset and that prey mindset. Really important. If they're not doing it, what happens is you wind up losing to someone who does. And more important than basketball is life. If we have a prey mindset in life, and I don't take any of these things serious as a school psychologist, depression, substance abuse, suicide, and now especially because if we were locked down before, the government can and probably will do it at some time again. What does that look like in life? If we're comparing ourselves too much to other people, if we're comparing ourselves too much to how life used to be, we can't do it. I know times are tough, but we need to see the opportunity. I read a lot of books, and I can tell you that the successful people in sports, in school, you look at the happiest people in the world, the richest people, the holiest people, the most successful athletes, the best coaches, they think similarly. Success leaves clues. And you could see the best ones, they see opportunity. They're not getting caught up in what they don't have. They're focusing on what they do have and what they could do better. During these times, we've gone through situations like this in the past. This is why history is important. We use history to understand the present, act in the moment, and predict the future. And when you know that, you know that, hey, the world has seen things like this before. And during this time, this has caused some people to jump levels. Some businesses have taken it to the next level. This happens during any depression or economic collapse. Some businesses become multimillionaires. Other ones collapse. Some athletes jump their competition. This is the easiest time for you to jump your competition because other people aren't necessarily treating it the same. The best are. The best already are. And that's why the whole concept of extra workouts is a little bit funny. If you're really trying to be the best, you're trying to be one of the top teams, it's not an extra workout. That's a mandatory workout to be the best. So sometimes that concept gets mixed up a little bit. But there are a lot of people who normally they're on track, they fall off. So your team can jump levels during this time if you're training smart. So like I said, that's a key thing. Making sure we're addressing that mindset. So thus, we're taking these teams through weekly Zoom meetings, and it's not just listening to me. Like right now, you're just listening to me. Instead, it's doing the mindset exercises. It's that group discussion. It's the mindset plan of life. We put a lot of time into our social media. I'd strongly recommend that also. I'll send that over after to Blake and Patrick. But our link tree, I don't know if you coaches use that. That might be a good thing for you to get. But that's our one-stop shop, our website, our podcast, our YouTube page. We pump out a lot of free information, a lot. And we know that, you have to give that value first. And also, I get fired up because I see all these athletes, all these coaches. I made all these mistakes. We went through it and we've seen it. So you don't have to. The idea is you want to take time out of the equation. You want to save time. Wise people learn from other people's mistakes. So we have that. We want to make sure we help take that to the next level. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. I know we have another 10 minutes to go, but like I said, we got to make sure we're working on that mindset. A couple other things we do, just to give you an idea, I'll throw out some other examples of lessons that we do with the team. We have the athletes become consistent performers. That's the big word with performance, consistency. And most people think the C word is confidence. More important than confidence is consistency. We all compete well sometimes. We all play poorly other times. How do you stay consistent all the way through? Well, you need to know exactly what thoughts, what emotions, and what behaviors bring out your best. So we have athletes write down on one side, this is one of our mindset lessons, their 3 best games. What were they thinking? What were they feeling? What was their energy level like on a scale of 1 to 10? You know, what factors were going on? How did they move? How did they behave? What were they telling themselves? Then on that paper, you find out what are the common themes? What are the underlying threads for those best games? You do the same thing with your worst games. 3 worst games. Doesn't necessarily mean you lost, but it means you underperformed. And what were you thinking? What were you feeling? What was your energy level like on a scale of 1 to 10? What behaviors did you take that day? And then underneath on that side, you write down what's the underlying themes, the patterns, the underlying threads. Then what you do, you have those 2 sheets of paper side by side. I'll tell you, this is such a powerful lesson. This is one of the first lessons we do with the athletes, because you could talk until you're blue in the face. I'm from New Jersey originally, so I say talk, walk, coffee, and chocolate. So sorry about that. But this is one of the first lessons we do with them. I could keep saying it until I'm blue in the face how important mindset is. But until these athletes prove it to themselves by writing it down in their own handwriting, and there is something to that. Sure, it's great to type. There's a little bit more power in writing it down in your own handwriting because you're engaging more of your body. You could see it. You know your handwriting. It sticks in your brain a little bit more. There's more hooks. There's more memory hooks. So when they write that down and they could see, this is what I look like when I'm at my best. This is what I look like when I'm at my worst. They could see it. It's night and day. Tens and thousands of athletes, we've seen the same thing. They know when they're at their best, usually they have a predator mindset. When they're at their worst, they usually have that prey mindset. They're thinking about who they want to let down, who they don't want to let down. They're thinking how big of a game it is. Like we said, everything's important, nothing special. 9 times out of 10, you make it special, you do worse. So making sure you keep it important, nothing special. Being able to relax. Maybe they're doing things in practice that keep themselves calm and relaxed, and that's why they're performing very well. Then they get in a game, they're real serious, they tighten up, they don't want to speak to anyone, you can't joke around with them, and they're off. Mentally and emotionally, they're off. So step 1 to getting that consistency is you need to find out what works on that one sheet, your 3 best games. You want to find out what does not work on that other sheet, and then you compare them side by side. And then very simple, do what works, don't do what doesn't work. When they write it down, it's so easy for them to see it. It's such an important lesson, but most people will not take the time, the 5-10 minutes that it takes to do that, to figure out what they look like when they're competing at their best and their worst. That's the difference between a champion. The best athletes can tell you that. And some people are naturally born with that, where they can kind of evaluate that part of it. But there's other athletes that can learn it. And even those best ones, like I said, they're still struggling in other areas. You might have one athlete that's very good at relaxing under pressure and being confident, but off the court, they're a wreck. Partying, drinking, smoking, doing things they shouldn't be doing, staying out late, playing video games all night, vaping. That's a big problem you see all across the country. Imagine if that athlete got stronger in that mental muscle, how much better they play on the court. And vice versa. You have an athlete who's doing everything right, coming to every practice, working harder than anyone else. They're staying after for more work, more drills, but they just don't know how to relax under pressure. They just can't get their minds off of letting their parents down, or all they're thinking about is getting that scholarship. They have the weight of their world on their back. That can be handled. Those are mental. That's not physical. So I'm all about physical training. I was a personal trainer. My degree is in exercise science, but we got to make sure we're also putting that time in on that mindset. Like we said, you can't do just like the definition of insanity. That's doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. You can't do that. You want, and even like I said, the best athletes, the best ones, the best teams probably need this the most, and especially during COVID, how uncertain things are. So we're happy to help any coaches on here. I'm happy to do a free session with the team. Anyone who wants to bring us in, I'm happy to do a free half-hour kickstart you, because I know it's tough. We want to be there for teams across the country during this time. You're struggling, everyone else is, but there's big opportunity. We have to look at it like that, and it begins right here in our mind, the 6 inches between our ears. How do we make the best of this situation right now? Come what may with the season. Maybe we have it, maybe we don't, maybe it's truncated. How do we see the opportunity, keep these athletes positive, and bring them to the next level? So whether it's basketball, school, or life, mindset makes the difference. Thank you very much.
We're right up at about 5 minutes left on our time. Obviously, very powerful talking about that 90%. And I know as a former school psychologist and all that stuff, you're aware of the trauma and challenges that kids face every day. Mm-hmm. So let's say I want to implement this. I really want to kind of push for the mindset piece. What's that look like for me during the season? If we're trying to coach that 90%, I got practice Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're preseason, but also we got 2 games a week. What does that look like for me as I'm trying to implement this in our season?
Absolutely. So yeah, generally teams start before the season, like in September, October, because now if you give the athletes the information, if you just start during the season, now if you have to, you have to. But if you start just then, it might be the emotions are very high. You're in the war zone. Everything is the emotions are very high. Just like getting better, getting stronger, better technically, it's always better to start a little bit before the season so they have time to digest the information. And then once they get into the season, it's implementation. But to answer your question, we do weekly sessions with our teams, 45 minutes. I've gone with teams for an hour and a half. But generally speaking, the average session lasts 45 minutes. We can do it in the morning, at night, during the day, whatever time works for the coaches. That's the benefit of having our 60 mindset coaches. We'll find someone who's able to work with the time that works for you. And we'd send you the basketball-specific mindset lessons. Now, if any of the coaches on here had any other sports that you coach and you wanted to bring those teams in, we could do that also. We have the sport-specific programs for all the different sports. Or, the AD if they wanted to bring in multiple teams. But the idea is weekly, it's got to be consistent, about 45 minutes. And we send you those lessons. You print them out for the team. Now they have those exercises forever. We have to take them through that. We've tried it in the past where we just gave away the worksheets. And it just didn't have any effect because the kids need to be taken through the program just like a strength coach takes someone through a lift. With mindset, you can't see it. So you have to take the time and fill out the exercises. But that's what it looks like, about 45 minutes on Zoom. No problem.
Awesome. The other thing I'd ask you to do is repeat that number that you gave out, the text number, and then make sure we know your contact information again. So that anybody wants to get a hold of you, it's easily available.
Yes, absolutely. So the text number, you would text Mindset 1 to the number 84576. That's the daily motivation blast. So that's a great thing to have. That's a great thing to look at regularly. As I said, also, we have a YouTube page, Winning Mindset YouTube page. We have a Basketball Mindset Instagram page. That's important to us because we know we got to meet the athletes where they're at. As coaches, we're only in their ear for a little while. You're only in their ear for a little while. What are they doing the rest of that time? They're on podcasts. They're on YouTube. They're scrolling on Instagram. So we want to make sure they're seeing that information over and over again so they continue learning throughout the week. It's not just during the one mindset session. They're seeing it regularly. Even if it's just a little bit dripping on them, that becomes real important. You don't want to underestimate that with kids. We got to meet the kids where they're at. And where they're at is social media, podcasts, and YouTube.
Excellent.
I can send you that also. That's no problem.
Appreciate it. Well, we're at our time. I appreciate your time today, Gene, and going through this with us. It's an excellent resource, and I look forward to catching up with you again.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Blake. Appreciate it, guys. God bless you. We'll see you.
Thank you.